Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a limp, and I am back with a little bit more of Blood Red Skies. We're going to jump right back into where we left off. A couple things I did want to point out is something I noticed in my previous video is make sure you're staying on top of your advantage levels and your pilot skill levels and stuff like that when it comes to activations, because that is something that's easy to get confused and get lost on, especially if you're playing solitaire like I am. In the fact that you're having to consider the speed, the pilot skill, and then what advantage level they are in. And that plays a huge deal in when they're activating. And it is very easy to make a mistake when you're doing this. And that can come into play. Previous turn, it wasn't as big of a deal, but it can be, game breaking on it if you activate the wrong plane at the wrong time. Like this Hellcat down over here is not going to activate before this 0, because this 0 is advantaged, this 0 is advantaged, and he's neutral, so he's not going to be able to do that. That, something you have to keep track of, because if he could activate before the 0 because he's faster, then he could get up and get on a 6 and get tailing, take away his advantage, and get, real on top of this guy. Now he's not going to be able to do it, which puts the Dauntless in danger. And something else I did want to show you guys was the fact that if you do have problems with any of your pegs, focus in there for me, you can print off other pegs. Now these, the ones that you print off, are not going to be able to rotate like the others, but you can take and use tokens or something like that to signify whether the plane is neutral or disadvantaged or advantaged. That's real easy to account for. But if you remember, the Dauntlesses didn't fit as well, but this is a 3D printed one and it fits very well onto the Dauntless aircraft. So if you have some problems, you can 3D print to try to rectify some of that as well. All right, so like I said, we're going to jump back in. Our Dauntlesses are heading in towards our aircraft carrier here at the top, but unfortunately for them, they do have some 0s that are here on their 6 coming in on them, and he is at disadvantaged state. He's one turn away, and I wanted to do a bombing run, but I don't know that he's gonna make it. But we still have one more Dauntless up there on the off chance this one doesn't. All right, so since we're doing our advantaged, we don't have, the only Hellcat we have that's advantaged is this one over there. The rest, because they did the K turns on the previous video, they're all either neutral or disadvantaged, so they're not doing as well. The 0s actually came out pretty good. That's the thing, you burn that advantage, you're going to be slower in activation on that next turn. All right, so we will go with him for our first activation, and we definitely know where he's going to go. He's going to slot in right here on the 6 of this Dauntless, try to get on top of him. And I think this 0 is probably going to do the same thing. If he goes forward in a K turn, gets around him, yeah, they'll both be doing the same thing. I don't think he's going to have to turn too hard. He should be able to just do a 45 to get in on him, but he's going to have to K turn it to get on him. But remember, the Dauntless has a turret, and the turret can fire back regardless of advantage level or anything like that. But the turret only gets to fire its firepower and not with the pilot skill. So the turret is not as good as I originally thought it was, unfortunately. All right, so the turret's going to fire after him. I had to finagle a little bit because my aircraft fell off, but we are going to have, let me look. I want to check my card, see if I can get any advantage for this 0. Nope, no advantage for him. So we're just going to be rolling our 1 for our firepower and then our 4 for the pilot skill for him. All right, so let's see what we get here, big money. All right, so we hit. That's good. That's what we needed. All right, so since we hit, that means he needs, his agility is 1. Yeah, his agility is a 1 plus his 3. So he gets to roll 4. He has to take and avoid this shot. Otherwise, he goes down because he is in a disadvantaged state. If he hadn't been disadvantaged, he would have gone down to disadvantage because he's tailing. All right, Dauntless, it's time. You got to survive this. No! You gotta be kidding me. All right, I kind of expected this, to be honest. I did not expect the Dauntless to survive, not with 2 zeros that were right there on his 6. So that was not going to work very well for him. Damn. Okay, well, let's pop him off. Actually, he's going to do his return fire because his return fire is simultaneous. And like I was saying, you could use a token to represent that with those 3D printed pegs. So you could do something like that for disadvantaged, that for advantaged, work real easy. All right, but he does get his one shot, his one little plink to see if he does anything back to the 0, which he doesn't. So nothing going on there. The zeros have now finally done something in return. Let's see, should be up above. All right, so our next 0 is actually here, and he's advantaged. This one is neutral, so he's not going to activate here. It would be the other one back down here. So he's probably going to just take and do a K turn again, come in on the 6 of him. I mean, he'll be exposed to a turret shot, but the turret shots are not that powerful. I'd like to get a B-17 to get some turret shots off, because those I think would work a hell of a lot better. All right, so I burned the advantage with him so he could slot around, get in on his 6, and that's going to bring him from advantaged to disadvantaged because he is now being tailed. So he is down, pointed down, and this again is going to give them the shot. And this is where I think I made my mistake in this game, is I should have, since the Dauntlesses were so slow, I should have hung a Hellcat back or something, covered them by screaming in the Hellcats. They did good. They took out a couple of zeros, but they left the Dauntlesses, both of them, fully exposed, which is now turning out to be very bad, because by focusing in with the 4 remaining zeros, they were able to tag team on the Dauntlesses. All right, so let's roll our shot for our 0, see if he gets it off. And yeah, he definitely gets it off. He gets the crit, which means the Dauntless. Okay, this is bad. This might be game, actually. The Dauntless is rolling 1 less defensive die, so he would get the 1 for his agility and then 4 for pilot skill, so he's going to be rolling 4 die. Damn, that crit is not good for him. Oh, and I just forgot, while he's still laden, he actually loses 1 more because of the pilot skill thing. I'd missed that part on the laden thing, so he's going to lose a die for that as well. All right, we just need a single success here to keep us in the game. Otherwise, that's going to be it. That's it. Both Dauntlesses just got taken out in the first round of this match, so that pretty well took us out. And all right, since I didn't get to show this in game, I just wanted to go over it real briefly, because I fully intended to actually get in there and get an attack going with our Dauntless. But what happens, right? So if you've got your dive bomber here, depending on the strength of the bomber. So if it's a light single engine bomber like this, the firepower only counts as 1. That's not that good for, getting your attack off. Heavy bombers get 4, medium bombers get 2. So with him doing this, he is able to get an advantage by burning all of his advantage. So he's effectively doing the dive bomb. And what you can do is, normally you can't burn from advantaged to disadvantaged, but a dive bomber can. So he could burn all the way to that, effectively doing his dive bomb. And plus, while doing that, he could make a 0 move. So effectively, he's going from straight up to straight down on top of the target, trying to hit it. If he does that, he gets to add +2 to his firepower. So that's the only way to really get a good bombing run off with these dive bombers to perform your attack. So he would effectively be able to do 3. Excuse me, I forgot to add his pilot skill to that. That does get added as well. So for his dive bombing attack, if he was advantaged coming in on it, he would get to roll that many dice. So he'd actually get to perform a relatively decent attack trying to damage him. Plus, if he gets a critical hit, he causes both area and point hits, which will really weaken the target, especially something like the aircraft carrier, because that's going to bring down its flak value, making it less of a threat. And then for me, just something easy if you wanted to, because remember, they do have the two different types, area and point hits. You could just pick a couple of different tokens. You could use the wing one for area and the boom chits for point tokens, just depending, whatever you want to do. Any token will work really, as long as you just keep track of how many hits that it's taken. Remember, for our aircraft carrier here, it is 4 point hits and 4 hull hits. Not all of them have to be destroyed. You have to take out one or the other to take care of it. But each one of those hits, I believe it's point, will knock down one of the flak value. Actually, it might be hull. Let me look real quick so I don't tell you the wrong one. Yeah, it is each point hit against the target will reduce its flak value. So each point hit against this aircraft carrier would remove one of its light flak strength. Effectively, the guns are getting destroyed. Same thing against the destroyers down over here. All right, so we're going to call that a game, actually, for Blood Red Skies, because at this point, I already know what will happen for the remainder of it. The Zeros have taken out the serious threat to the aircraft carrier, and more than likely, the Hellcats would be able to clean up the Zeros if they were to dogfight it out, because the Hellcats are so much better. It's not an even fight anymore, not even close. But this was really my fault. I did a very bad strategy for those Dauntless. I was thinking Hellcats come in, they'll screen, they'll pick off some of the Zeros, and they did, but there's 6 Zeros. So as the Zeros flew through, they went straight to the Dauntless, which is what I would do if I was flying the Zeros as an opposition game, and go for the biggest threat against the target. So, is Blood Red Skies a fun game? I believe it is. I definitely have fun with it. I think it works. My biggest issue with the game comes down to the fact that, for me personally, I sometimes get confused when I'm doing the activation, like I mentioned earlier, on which ones I'm activating in what orders, and can sometimes make mistakes on that. I think that is much easier to do when you're playing solitaire and you're trying to remember both sides. If you're just having to remember your own aircraft, it is easier to keep track of when yours are activating versus when your opponents are activating. There are some small rules that get a little niggly sometimes, like the turret firepower. You don't get to add pilot skill to it, but bombing runs, you do get to add pilot skill to it. The flak values on these, I read that rule book in that section numerous times, and I could not find anything that says whether or not they get a defensive roll when they're taking flak fire. So I don't know 100%. I ruled in the favor that they do get a defensive roll, an agility roll against it, because everything else does. So why wouldn't the flak? But again, I could potentially be wrong. So a couple things like that I'd like to kind of see cleaned up, and the rules, just tweaked a little bit, but that's minor errata. Something else I also like is I think these aircraft are relatively the appropriate size, that if you want to use them in a game like Flames of War, you can. They're really the close to 15 mil size. I forget exactly what that is, 1 to 100, 1 to 200, something like that. But I think they're close enough that you could use them and it's not going to look wrong in the game. Not to mention the fact that you've got the little stands that you can put them on, so you can add them into your Flames of War game and it will look, perfectly fine. For me, the big thing that kind of took the game to that next level was the addition to the rules of different types of targets. So you can have not only sea battles, but ground battles as well. You can be over the ground. You're trying to target bases or airstrips, aircraft carriers, destroyers, cruisers, transports, whatever, truck convoys. You can have whatever type of target that you want. So it gives you so many more different types of objectives that you can go for. I think that type of game is so much more fun to play than one in which you're just lining up your aircraft, they're lining up their aircraft, and then you try to outfly them, right? You have something that you're doing. This one, the bombers needed to be protected. The aircraft carrier needed to be protected. Whoever got the others' important stuff first, basically wins the game. One last thing while we're talking about it, the aspect of the game when it comes to the advantage, neutral, and disadvantaged levels of the game. it is their way of trying to account for different levels of altitude and speed in a miniatures based game. And I've played a handful of different ship, plane, skirmish games, and you try to account for that. How does it work? And I will say, I think this is much more streamlined than some of the ones that do have the altitude into the game. Games like Age of Dogfights, World War I or World War II. You guys, if you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. Definitely like that game. One of my favorites. I really enjoyed that one. But in that one, you are absolutely keeping track of your different levels of altitude, and it gets very fiddly, right? You have to have all the rules in there, accounting for attacking at different levels and bonuses and modifiers and all the other stuff. And in this one, all you have to do is simply click the aircraft back, middle, or forward. So it's much easier to kind of keep track of what's going on. And plus, I got to say, from my first video where I was talking about the different advantage levels going first versus going last, after playing through the game again, I definitely have to say I agree with the way that they are doing it here, because in this one, the way the game rules play out with shooting, right? So you're going to shoot at the start and then do some maneuvering and then potentially shoot at the end, outmaneuver or turn, all the different stuff. The order in which this game is played, it makes much more sense for the higher pilot skills and the more advantaged planes to go first, because you're not all waiting to shoot at the same time. You're shooting as the game goes on. Really, it made that difference, because in the previous turn, the Hellcats had gotten so far away from the Zeros, they were still pointing in this direction. They were going to be able to get up in this turn, and they would have been tailing on most of these Zeros had they gone first, and it would have changed the whole dynamic. But because the Zeros were able to keep their altitude up and have that advantage, they got to go first, which meant they were able to target both the Dauntlesses before the Hellcats had a chance to react, because they had spent most of their speed coming in and turning so they could destroy a couple of Zeros. It wasn't their target. They should have been more protective of the Dauntlesses. So yeah, fun game, definitely worth checking out. There's multiple different starter packs. I like the Midway one. I think it comes with a good selection of aircraft, but whatever area, whatever time frame suits you is definitely one to check out. And like I said, they've got a multitude of different expansions that you can get for the game if you're interested, and they do have the STL files. Make sure you reference my overview video for the links to those. All right, that's going to be it for me. You guys take care. I'll catch you in the next one.